As we prime ourselves for the coming excitement of Pokemon Legends ZA, we are particularly thrilled to see the return of Mega Evolutions, which are responsible for some of the most bonkers forms of Pokemon ever. Seeing as Mega Evolutions are very conscious, deliberate moves to seriously improve Pokemon, it's to be expected that even Pokemon that were less impressive or even outright bad were spurred to new heights upon receiving one. Today, however, we're looking at those Pokemon which unexpectedly weren't helped by their Megas, or even though they may have technically been an improvement, they didn't help enough. And you'd certainly expect more from our first choice, the Pokemon whose Mega disappointed everyone with Mega Garchomp. Garchomp is the ultimate emblem of this concept. There was a lot of excitement around its Mega since Chomp is already a great Pokemon, and as more details were revealed, the Megas given to other already great Pokemon, like its fellow pseudo-legendary Salamence and Metagross, were absolutely tremendous. And it wasn't just them. Mega Kangaskhan, which was previously a lowly NU Pokemon, was quickly in talks to be banned from OU, and immediately was strong in Ubers and dominant in VGC. Now, Megas can't all be Kangaskhan, but look at how Lopunny went from completely unusable to 2-time OU star. If that can happen, Garchomp's gonna be insane, right? At first glance, Mega Garchomp has a lot to like. A ludicrously high attack stat, an actually strong special attack stat equivalent to Kyurem Black, and a major improvement to its already great defense. Even its special defense got a nice boost. Additionally, its new ability was Sand Force, making its stab Earthquake even stronger in the Sandstorm that it was so commonly used with. Mega Garchomp was much stronger, was very bulky, and was slower? What? Garchomp's base 102 speed is one of the most perfectly placed unique stats in competitive Pokemon history. So much so that it's often been referred to as a troll. In its debut Gen 4, it got the jump on the base 100 speed tier that defined so much of the tier, and then in Gen 5, it still got the jump on base 101 Landorus Incarnate and Thundurus Therian. Garchomp's speed is a massive part of what makes it so excellent. Being as fast as it is with its power, Swords Dance, and stab combination is why it's so nightmarish, assisted even further in this by its downright amazing natural bulk. You can crank up the power and bulk all you want, and yes, Mega Chomp does some insane things power-wise, like Sand Force Earthquake potentially one-hit KOing Hippowdon after a Swords Dance, but as soon as you take away the speed, you make it much easier to deal with. Base 92 speed isn't even bad, not by a long shot. In and of itself, it's actually quite good for how it gets the jump on not just base 90s, but even Landorus Therian, sitting at base 91. However, when you also have the option of a very similar Pokemon whose speed tier is just so much better, most of the time you're gonna go with that. Not only does speed make a world of difference in game, base Garchomp isn't exactly wanting for power, and it doesn't take up a Mega slot. In terms of VGC, Mega Garchomp is a complete and utter waste. While base Garchomp is of course superb, Mega Garchomp's power, even in sand, nor its bulk, do anywhere near enough to compensate for the fact that it's slower against targets as crucial as Mega Charizard Y and Tapu Lele. In terms of singles, Mega Chomp actually isn't bad. It can even be quite decent. In Gen 6, it can be quite effective on sand balance teams, which are quite effective without the explicit need for a certain Mega, and this flexibility leads them to have a good spot for Mega Chomp's downright brutal wall breaking. After a Swords Dance, its Sand Force boosted Stone Edges crush even physically defensive Skarmory, Tangrowth, and Landorus Therian, which makes late game cleanup for its teammate Sandrush Excadrill a cinch, as does the fact that boosted Earthquake so thoroughly does Slowbro. It helps that, in Gen 6, Chomp retains its original speed stat on the turn and Mega Evolves, so it can still briefly chase out something like Mega Metachan. It loses this in Gen 7, but Mega Chomp is still a great Swords Dancer as sand balance teams, while a mixed Stealth Rock set also came along for more offensive squads, letting it instantly drop a powerful Draco Meteor on Landorus T. However, even with all of this, base Garchomp is much better. You can occasionally use Mega Chomp and have it be genuinely very good. Yes, that's absolutely true, but so is the fact that by and large, you're going to want base Chomp and its better speed far more often. And this was not a trade-off to be made at all lightly, or in the case of VGC, at all. Garchomp is the only Mega on this list that wasn't lower tier in singles, but it was so often a downgrade from its base form, which a Mega really isn't supposed to do, and this means that even if it had been better than useless in VGC, it'd have still thoroughly earned its spot, just like our next Pokemon on this list, Mega Audino. But before we go to Mega Audino and how it bores us to sleep, our sponsor is here to help us sleep. The best in sleep masks, Manta Sleep. Look, a lot of work goes into making these videos, and my editor and I need a break every now and then from working on it, and that includes during the day. I need my shut-eye, and it's too bright outside. Other sleep masks just aren't as comfortable on my eyes, or they squeeze my head too much. The Mana Sleep Mask Pro solves all of these problems. The C-shaped eye cups are unmatched when it comes to comfort, as there is zero pressure on your eyelids. And of course, Mana has a wide selection of sleep masks with different functions. So if you need something other than the Pro, there's a high chance that there's one perfect for you. Honestly, I don't even feel this mask. Whenever I want to take my power nap for the day, I just slip this on. And speaking of naps, I am all for Mana's Pro nap movement, by the way. Enough nap shaming, take those naps. My mind eventually goes numb if I edit and record these videos for too long, so I need my naps when I want to recharge. So if you want an awesome sleep mask and also support the channel to help us produce more content, click the link in the description below or go to Mana Sleep and use code FSG for 10% off your purchase. And thank you so much to Mana Sleep for sponsoring this video. Here's how bad Mega Audino is. You have to hold off on Mega Evolving it for as long as possible because in its base form, it has one of the best abilities in the game, Regenerator. When it Mega Evolves, it loses that in favor of an ability completely useless in singles, Healer. Basically, Mega Audino is functionally a base Audino that can't be tricked, which is nice, but also, really? It has other problems too, like the fact that it becomes a normal Fairy type instead of just a Fairy type, and it's obscenely slow, and its most reliable recovery is the Wish Protect combination, which in conjunction with its low damage output makes it about the most passive exploitable wall you could imagine. Mega or no Mega, which tends to undercut its impressive bulk. Mega Audino is so bad, one of the most useful things it can do is Healing Wish. An amazing move for sure, but generally not something you're going to use your Mega slot on. In fairness, there are other Megas that also hold off on evolving immediately, most notably Sharpedo, which hangs back until late game, so it can procure its base form speed boost before Mega evolving and gaining strong jaw. Diancie also sometimes needs to use its base form's bulk to check something like Volcarona, so it holds off of Mega evolving. Even Mega Charizard X sometimes stays in its base form while Dragon Dancing, so it can set up in front of Earthquake. However, these Pokemon all have massive benefits from both holding off on the Mega and eventually Mega evolving. Audino is thoroughly limp both before and after, which is why it landed in NU before moving up to RU in Gen 6 and remained NU in Gen 7. Sure, it can potentially pull off a Calm Mind Restock set, but talk about weak. It doesn't even have Moonblast as Fairy Stab, having to settle for Dazzling Gleam, and its special attack actually improves upon Mega Evolving, going all the way to base 80. Before Mega Evolving, it has non-stab Dazzling Gleam from base 60 special attack. It does significantly less damage than, say, Wartortle's Scald. This is while it has Regenerator, by the way. After you Mega, you lose Regenerator and still aren't doing much damage. And sure, not every Pokemon is supposed to deal a lot of damage, but Audino isn't offering much of anything else either. And if you're going to be lacking in leftovers and a reliable recovery move, you should at least offer some sort of more tangibly impactful utility in the event you're getting out-damaged by Meganium Energy Ball. Well, you can, if you go with an offensive Healing Wish set, which does acceptable damage by lower tier standards, with Stab Hyper Voice, alongside Fire Blast and Surf's coverage, bolstered by some surprise factor, but ultimately, the best thing Mega Audino can do is sacrifice itself. And none of this applies to VGC, of course. You will never pull off any sort of extended Calm Mind Sweep or Healing Wish Revival when facing down two Pokemon in the format whose turn count tends to linger in the single digits. Healer is a cool ability, but not nearly cool enough to compensate for Mega Audino's complete and utter uselessness in both offense and utility. Healer would be great if it were on a Pokemon that wasn't dangerously close to a non-entity by any standard, let alone that of a Mega evolution. In singles' lower tiers, there are far fewer Megas and thus less competition for the slot, but in VGC, with all the amazing Megas at your disposal, you do not want to pass up using something actually good or even decent in order to use one that does almost literally nothing, just like our next Pokemon on the list, Mega Houndoom. Houndoom has a lot going for it, but it's not quite good enough at what it does to overcome the enormity of its flaws. A bunch of bad weaknesses, including Stealth Rock, alongside Paper Thin Frailty, while not being anywhere nearly fast or strong enough to leave enough of an impact when it does hit the field. Sure, it's had strong moments. It has minor pursuit trapping niches in Gens 2 and 3 OU, and excelled in Gen 4 UU, where when it wasn't pursuing, it was turning the tables on waters with Pastoral Berry Nasty Plot sets. But despite this much lower power level, with the first two gens even lacking Stealth Rock, and even though it can choose from two amazing abilities in Early Bird or Flash Fire, Houndoom is innately underwhelming because those stats are just not enough, and that was in singles. In VGC, it's not packing any sort of utility to make itself worthwhile, while the frailty and lower power are even greater flaws in the 2v2 format. Fire Dark is potentially great typing, but look at the others of its ilk. Incineroar, which packs good power, bulk, and nigh endless utility in singles and especially VGC, and Chi-Yu, which steps up the all-important base 100 speed benchmark, but more importantly, it's so strong, it's as if it were actually forged in Hellfire. So with the promise of the Fire, Dark type, and Houndoom itself, it just needs more stats, right? Mega Houndoom does just that. Rather than the reinvention style of many Megas, it simply cranks up the pre-existing Houndoom. So what's it doing on this list of the worst Megas? Why has it dropped all the way to RU in both Gen 6 and 7? It got banned both times, but a Mega Evolution being too strong for RU isn't exactly what the kids would call a flex. So what gives? Simple. Mega Houndoom just didn't crank it up enough. Okay, maybe not in terms of base speed. Going from 95 to 115 is excellent. Suddenly it's on par with the likes of famous speedsters Starmie and Raikou, as it gets the jump on a ton of other Pokemon already considered fast in singles and VGC alike, like Latios and Thundurus Incarnate. Oh, and it has the thoroughly unique trait of being the only Mega to outspeed and one-hit KO the mighty Mega Metagross with its stab. Beyond speed though, Mega Houndoom just doesn't bring the heat. Too much of its base stat total went to buffing its bulk, including a stunning plus 40 to its base defense. That's nice and all, but it should not be getting more in its defense than its special attack, which received a quote-unquote mere plus 30. Now that might sound wild that 140 base special attack alongside Nasty Plot doesn't hit hard enough, and if it weren't a Mega, yeah, it'd be a menace, but by OU and even UU standards, it's not strong enough, at least relative to its competition, which tends to be more immediate and wide-ranging in its coverage. Mega Houndoom without a Nasty Plot isn't particularly scary, and getting that plot isn't exactly easy because even with the improvements to its bulk, it's still frail. Even if not quite knocked over by a light breeze anymore, the fact that it's weak to so much means the bulk winds up pointless. Being able to survive Gliscor or Earthquake sounds amazing, until you realize Mega Houndoom, a Stealth Rock weak and sand affected Pokemon, has to be in perfect condition in order to do so anyway. These same issues plague it even more in VGC. There might not be Stealth Rock there, but a hit taker it is not, which again would be fine if Mega Houndoom were either much stronger or wasn't a Mega. As it stands, it needed more of the Mega Beedrill treatment. Forget any pretense towards defense, just make it as strong and fast as possible. Technically, the built-in extra power is there with Mega Houndoom's ability, Solar Power, but setting up Sun for it is incredibly difficult, and while it can use the move itself, A, that compounds pre-existing issues with fitting all the moves it wants, and B, don't forget that Solar Power further cuts into its already non-existent longevity. If Mega Houndoom truly had auto KO level power and even greater speed, it could be cool as a way to punish Mega Charizard-wise Drought, for example, and could unleash some truly terrifying heat waves. But as it stands, Mega Houndoom is just kind of limp. Its whole concept is more Houndoom, but the problem is that more of Houndoom still isn't enough, just how more of the next Pokemon still isn't enough with Mega Abomasnow. In Gens 4 and 5, Abomasnow compensated for the many weaknesses of its typing by 1, the permanence of its hail, and 2, the massive amounts of utility leveraged from various items and bulky Leech Seed protects sets' longevity enforced through leftovers, to the power of its many super effective hits amplified by Expert Belt, to the ability to stay in on anything and trade for it early game with Focus Sash. As such, Mega Abomasnow had a lot to make up for, giving Gen 6's nixing of permanent weather and the fact that it couldn't hold an item. To say Game Freak failed spectacularly in this regard would be an understatement, as audacious as Mega Abomasnow's design was confounding. It wound up falling to RU in Gen 6, where it was banned, and then NU in Gen 7, where it remained. Mega Abomasnow begs the question, what is this supposed to achieve? Yes, on paper you can answer that question, as it's clearly supposed to be some sort of bulky Trick Room attacker. Its speed drops to Snorlax tier, its bulk gets a nice boost, and its offenses are pumped up, which should work alongside its strong dual stabs whose types work so well in tandem, but the particulars of the design leave Mega Abomasnow unable to execute the strategy. Trick Room attacker of Mega Abomasnow sounds great if you don't think about it for more than 2 seconds or 4 seconds, but the trouble that pops up as soon as the 5th second rolls around, if not sooner, is that this is a Pokemon, for all the benefits of its typing, that is absolutely littered with weaknesses, many of them among the most crippling in the game, including not just Stealth Rock, but so many attacking types that it winds up including common priority as well, including Scizor's famous Bullet Punch. So much for Trick Room, and its new bulk isn't nearly sufficient as a safeguard. The bulk sure would do nicely on a defensive set, but bulky Abomasnow isn't going to work without leftovers. Another reason Mega Abomasnow's whole deal is so ill-conceived is that, significant though the buff to its offenses is, a plus 40 boost to both is still at base 132 isn't quite the unstoppable destructive beast it needs to be. Now, unlike Mega Houndoom, Mega Abomasnow is actually quite close to the type of power that it needs to be dishing out, given both its Stab, Blizzard, and Woodhammer is such high base power, and they are beautifully complementary, and they get an effective power buff from the extra 6% that Snow Warning pelts into their non-weather changing switch-ins, most of which Mega Abomasnow threatens anyway. However, since as Mega Abomasnow only functions under Trick Room, which is an infinitely less effective strategy in singles than VGC, hence it struggles even in the lower tiers, it needs to dish out cold one-hit KOs, not two-hit KOs enhanced by extra hail damage. Even Blizzard being a spread move in VGC wasn't enough in this regard. Ice Weeks aplenty though there were, if it didn't take up a Mega slot, sure, it'd be pretty cool, but when you're competing against Kangaskhan and company, it didn't come close to cutting it. Regardless of the format, as soon as Mega Abomasnow leaves an opposing Pokemon alive, it leaves its many weaknesses disastrously exposed. Maybe, just maybe, going the extra bulk route wasn't worthwhile when it was now going to be outsped by absolutely everything. Mega Abomasnow works in the lower tiers, whereas other stats tower over its competition, often not fully evolved, and so it gets skirt by the fact that it's going to get outsped by everything, very much including those NFVs not needing Trick Room support. But in the standard formats, it is a gimmick at best, singles and VGC alike. As far as gimmicks go, you could do worse. Thanks to the disruptive nature of its stab, further augmented by hail damage, it's certainly threatening, if nothing else, but it's not beating the opportunity cost allegations, and it's definitely not something you'll be relying on when you're really gunning for that win, just like how you wouldn't rely on this bad Ghost Mega with Mega Banette. Banette was precisely the type of lowly Pokemon that needed a Mega buff. It had a strangely high base 115 attack stat, surrounded by low stats everywhere else. Non-existent bulk of base 64 HP, 65 defense, and 63 special defense alongside 65 speed. It's like they forgot to give it its final stage. Even by the lower power level of Gen 3 UU, Banette struggled as it was outsped and hit so hard by just about everything, even defensive Pokemon that weren't actually trying to hit hard at all. It was certainly decent, but rarely anything more than that. Its ceiling was quite low, and it had a heck of a time trying to reach it when it had to dance around being threatened by nearly every Pokemon on the opposing team. Plus, with Gen 4 introducing the physical special split, it actually downgraded in stab, going from Gen 3's Shadow Ball to Gen 4's Shadow Claw. It even lost the effective coverage of Hidden Power Fighting that it used before. It got some cool priority in Shadow Sneak and Sucker Punch, and Will-O-Wisp was always a great move. But yeah, post Gen 3 Banette was basically a non-entity. With the Mega, it would be a prime candidate for reinvention. Instead, Mega Banette is content to pretty much just be its base form, but with higher stats. Yes, it is indeed as bad as it sounds, but wait, some of you might say, can't better stats solve just about anything? Well, yes, theoretically, but I gotta tell you, look, I knew Mega Banette's non-attack stats were bad, but going back to check them for this video, I was still unprepared, because wow, they are bleak. They really decided to keep that whole disproportionate attack and awful everything else for whatever reason. Yes, base 165 attack is staggering, it is the equivalent of Rampardos after all, but this is undercut by the fact that Banette's stab options are still either its Shadow Claw at a thoroughly underwhelming 70 base power, or Phantom Force, which is 90 base power but takes 2 turns to go off. Still, in and of itself, this is at least workable, and Banette has a buff knockoff to toy with as well now, so sure, fine, but if it's not going to get some sort of real consistent stat, surely the rest of its stats don't have to be so pathetic. I mean, seriously, these would be paltry on anything. Base defense buff to 75, special defense to 83, and speed to 75, but on a Mega evolution? You know that thing where Mega Houndoom and Abomasnow would be pretty sweet if they didn't take up your Mega slot? Yeah, Mega Banette is so bad, even if it didn't take up the Mega slot, it'd be a wasteful blob of nothing. Oh, also the unused special attack goes up to base 93, wow. What does Mega Banette even do? Well, it gets Prankster, so it has priority Will-O-Wisp and Destiny Bond. Not that these aren't nice, but really, it's all about that oversized attack set, and this is the ability. It's thus no shock that Mega Banette is a 2-time denizen of RU, where by the way, it isn't even particularly good, and it may as well not exist in serious VGC play. Yeah, Wolf has won a regional with it, but that doesn't necessarily make it a Pokemon that's good, as plenty of great players have won with terrible Pokemon before. Besides Wolf, Eugene Tan reached 15th at the 2015 Australian Nationals with it, which honestly might be more impressive than winning the whole tournament with Mega Salamence. Yes, Mega Banette had to improve on a seriously terrible base form, but the attempt to do so resulted in a serious misallocation of stats. It's basically the Rampardos of Mega evolutions. The one cool thing about it quickly disappears from sight when you see the rest, meaning you don't want to waste the team slot on it, let alone a Mega Stone. Now Mega Rampardos, that's an idea. At least Mega Banette looks cool. And speaking of absurdly high attack stats, our next Pokemon on this list is Mega Beedrill. Say what you will about Game Freak, but you really couldn't have asked them to do anything more from Mega Beedrill. They went above and beyond the Call of Duty, min-maxing it within an inch of its life. It's almost like they decided to model Paradox Pokemon after its design. Mega Beedrill does not pretend to have any interest in quote-unquote taking hits, as its bulk remains completely unchanged. In fact, Game Freak helps it out by taking 30 base base points out of its already worse than useless base 45 special attack. As a fun bit of trivia, Mega Beedrill gets to proudly brandish having the second worst special attack in the game. It's illustrious base 115, tying with Magikarp, Happiny, and Darumaka. It's only eclipsed by Feebas, Bonsly, Alolan Sandshrew, and Shuckle. More importantly, this means Game Freak has an extra 30 points with which they can pump up its base stat total, and rather than any perfunctory buffs to its bulk, they pour it all into attack and speed, bringing Mega Beedrill to a whopping base 150 and 145 respectively. Yep, Mega Beedrill shares an attack stat with Groudon. Oh, and it gets better, as Mega Beedrill's ability is Adaptability, which gives it a jackhammer of a boost to its stats, getting a ×2 multiplier as opposed to the usual 1.5. All this is incredible on a Pokemon with Stab U-turn. Oh, and it's also got Poison Stab to rip apart all those popular fairy types. But what of the dreaded steel types that will wall such a lower tier stab combination? That's what Drill Run is for, and with a high critical hit ratio for good measure. And that's just 3 moves too. In the last slot, Mega Beedrill could run Knockoff to rid any wall of its pesky leftovers, or it can potentially trap something with Pursuit, or it can boost with Swords Dance to sweep late game, or it can further bother bulky ground types by laying Toxic Spikes, which by the way, it also absorbs upon switching in. Wait, you're telling me this thing provides team support too? Is there anything that it can't do? The annoying yet necessary question no Mega Beedrill user likes to hear, because they hate the answer they must give. Yes, actually. In fact, there are many things Mega Beedrill can't do. Take a hit for one. Well, neither can Deoxys attack, and that thing eats galaxies for breakfast, while making Mega Beedrill look like a Hippowdon bulk-wise. Mega Houndoom was underwhelming, but come on, Mega Beedrill does have the stats for this kind of thing. Groudon attack alongside one of the highest speed stats in the game, what more can you ask for? Stronger stab moves, unfortunately. Adaptability helps a lot, yes, but when your stabs are in the 70 and 80 base power range, there's still only so much strength you can muster. It also doesn't help at all that these stabs are shrugged off by a lot, and even Drill Run's coverage does nothing whatsoever to help with the fact that Mega Beedrill is completely shrugged off by many bulky ground types. It is completely hapless in the face of Gliscor, for instance, and it doesn't get much better against Landorus Therian either. Sad as it is to say, Mega Beedrill doesn't hit hard enough, which means it becomes a lot more difficult to reconcile yourself with its inability to withstand Eevee's tackle. Competition for that all-important slot for both a team member and a Mega is fierce, and it's tough to justify something that's going to be running from the first glimpse of Scarfers and Priority when it's also not unleashing some sub-uber equivalent of Deoxys Attack's Psycho Boost. This is amplified terribly in VGC's 2v2 format, where Pokemon whose frailty is so easily exploited better really bring the goods beyond just hitting hard, which Mega Beedrill does not. In singles, Mega Beedrill isn't bad, as it actually did land in UU in both Mega generations, but it wasn't especially good either, and that wound up meaning that it is actually bad. It was a decidedly B-ranked Pokemon, which stings more than its Felsinger ever has, considering the competition for a Mega slot. It's worse than there just being other more consistent Megas actually. Mega Beedrill has to contend with the tier's king of Megas, Aerodactyl, which utterly ruins its existence, and that not only is it a far superior Pokemon overall, it is actually even faster than Beedrill, and can take on its stabs and Drill Run and Knockoff, and even Pursuit traps. It's truly grim. As much as we all dreamt of Felsinger KOing something and rocketing it up to +3 attack, with which it would then brilliantly sweep, like some sort of Moxie Pokemon except approximately a million times cooler, unfortunately, Mega Beedrill was the pits in VGC and singles alike. And before we get to our final Pokemon, we've got some dishonorable mention. 3 Megas that weren't truly terrible in our eyes, but certainly on the underwhelming side. First up, Steelix, whose Mega evolution is like Houndoom's, and that its whole design is just more Steelix. Unlike Houndoom, this is generally a good thing, and new bonuses include Mega Steelix being able to hit a special hit and actually dish out some respectable damage. The problems though are that it is a defensive Pokemon lacking leftovers, which isn't great, and limited it to singles' lower tiers, while in VGC it offered just about nothing. Next up, Camerupt, which goes even slower than Abomasnow with its Mega, but has better overall typing to go with its improved bulk, and more importantly, unleashes truly insane levels of sheer force power. Still, the fact that it's so ridiculously slow held it back from VGC success, as well as working in anything but the lower singles tiers. Though we must mention at one point in early Gen 7 OU, pre-Ultra Sun and Moon, Mega Camerupt was successfully used in a serious tournament. Finally, Absol receives an amazing improvement upon going Mega. It's very fast, very strong, and has one of the best abilities in the game, Magic Bounce. However, it's once again a case of immense frailty, and it's not quite being earth-shatteringly strong enough to overcome its flaws, leaving it unique but not actually good in terms of VGC, and limited it in singles as well, dropping all the way to RU in Gen 7, though there it was banned. And now we move on to our final final pick with Mega Glalie. Glalie's Mega form has a lot to like, and Game Freak did a lot of good for it. It's an ice type, so they didn't bother giving it more bulk, and instead just turned up the offense. Its speed goes to the landmark base 100, and both its attacking stats get a nice boost too. Plus it gets Refrigerate as its ability, which effectively makes its normal turn ice stat much stronger than regular ice stat. So what's the problem? Well, by maintaining Mega Glalie's whole even stat thing, and making both of its attack and special attack base 120, they kind of robbed it of hitting really hard. Base 120 is great, but by the time Megas rolled into town, it was a sort of expected benchmark for any hard hitter, let alone the Pokemon taking up the Mega slot on your team. Yes, Refrigerate helps with the power level quite a bit, but the fact of the matter is that Mega Glalie wants to be a physical attacker, and so much focus on its special attack takes away from its primary strength. Sure, the fact that it's got a pretty strong freeze dry to threaten waters is nice, but it can still do this with less special attack while posing a far greater physical threat. When it's spamming Refrigerate boosted return or double edge, for the most part anyway, when it's picking something off with priority Ice Shard, great. When it's going out with a boom with Refrigerate boosted explosion, well, that's just grand. When it has to rely on non-stab Earthquake for coverage, well, it's not weak, but it's not exactly as threatening as you'd like. Mega Glalie being an offensive Pokemon that can also lay spikes for itself is extremely appealing, but it's not quite the Greninja you'd like it to be. In addition to the struggles of switching in as an Ice type, Stealth Rock being the primary but far from the only offender, it's also not nearly as fast as it wants to be. Base 100 works for Megas like Medicham and the Charizards because they offer truly shattering levels of strength, while Glalie comes up short. Even in VGC, where you don't have to worry about Stealth Rock, you wind up having this Pokemon that's just not strong nor fast enough to justify a team slot even before you get to the Mega part of the problem. In singles, Mega Glalie dropped to RU in Gen 6 and NU in Gen 7. Despite YouTube superstar and generally awesome guy Blunder's tournament heroics with it in Gen 7 OU, it was a one-off surprise and generally condemned to just be too lacking stat-wise to deliver the full extent of the promise that it offered. An offensively geared Mega Evolution with base 120 attack, there's something really wrong with that picture. Maybe Game Freak just designed it as a test for a showcase of Blunder's amazing skills? Well, if that's the case, they certainly succeeded. And thank you so much to our Platinum patrons. Thank you to Amphozenus, Alex Sable, Anthony Belval Renault, Bingleton, Daniel Isbeast, Corman, Eric Dissing, Funky, Glitcherton, Howl, Jack G, King Yabber, Nightfall, Megamon VGC, Mojo Game Slayer, Nurse Jake, One Penguin to Rule, Pretzel SP, Sojiro Sakura, Spavoon, Skylaria, Soras and Croxon, Shiwei Miji, Stoneface Colin, Kiboflu, Wardine, for their major support of our videos.